Hello everyone, right here with another video. This time I'm going to be talking about vector lines and my process on inking in general. Now in this process I'm going to be using several different methods. In this first little bit here I'm going to be using a fill and erase kind of method for the eyes and mouth. When inking, usually I use this method throughout the whole entire piece, but for this particular piece with Vivi, I'm only using it for the beginning here. It's basically when I use like a really thick line and then I erase around it to create the desired shape that I want for the rest of the piece. And I only want to touch on that briefly because I go on and I don't use this again till like the later half of the video, but it is very, very helpful for anybody who is having trouble with line arts and creating confident lines. If you're starting out with digital line art, I suggest using this method just as a test thing before trying to, if you're still like practicing confident lines. The rest of this video, though, goes over vector lines and using the vector layers specifically for assuring really smooth, confident lines, as well as being able to edit those lines because vector layers are extremely, extremely helpful with those types of things, especially for somebody who might have like a little bit more of like shaky hands and what have you. So yeah, vector layers are super, super important and fun, and once you figure out how to use them, it it makes a line art process go so much faster. So we're going to go over some of those points today with the vector layers. The first thing with the vector layers is that you can have a lot of power and control over each vector layer. You can see in the bangs here and the hair when I was doing that earlier is that I could be able to control certain points within the lines, and that's one of the beauties of using vector layers, especially if you have shaky hands and what have you. You can use a lot of the editing tools that Clip Studio provides to just fix any type of line to make it as perfect as you want. Of course, being able to do that on your own, like through your hands, is extremely like efficient, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way and you need that little extra bit of like editing. With vector lines, you can create points and delete points however you see fit. The less points that your line has, the more smooth of a curve you'll get. And of course, the more points that you have, the more control you can have over the lines that you see there. Now, the points are a little bit hard to touch because they are so tiny. So I highly recommend just getting used to like your feel on like either using a mouse and keyboard kind of method when using and editing the points when using the object tool and editing the points, or like if you're really really good with your tablet you can hit the points with your pen and keep it going. Now there are a few tools that I use here for the chin. One of them is the redraw tool that you can see in your sets. It allows you to, what it exactly says is to redraw the line on your vector, and it took me a few times to get what I needed to get. Now there is a second thing here that you can kind of see is that I'm using something that's thickening up the lines of that line art. That is another beauty of vector lines here, is that you can really edit like any type of line that you make on this program. And it's really 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 nice and helpful, and it makes things go so much faster and smoother. So yeah, if you are a line art artist, I highly recommend getting used to your vector lines. Photoshop doesn't quite have anything like this, and neither does Paint Tool SAI, at least not to the extreme that Clip Studio has, where it has all the editing tools that are available in it. But SAI kind of has an okay vector line application as well. If you're using Paint Tool SAI, they have the eraser tools, the vector eraser tool. And for anybody who's using Photoshop who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Clip Studio and SAI have this amazing vector layer application that allows you to erase vector lines within other vector layers. So you can have as many vector layers as you want stacked on top of each other, and they will just like, as you can see that thumb, that just like I just erased part of that finger, just really easy just by like tapping it with the vector erase tool. And you'll see me do it again with the back of the hair there once I finish inking in the hand here. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool nifty tools with Clip Studio. Of course, Clip Studio also has the curve lines and the straight lines that you can add. You saw me use it there for like the underparts of like her arm. And so like yeah, just definitely try to get used to your vector lines if you're a line art artist. It will cut down your time significantly to the point where you can actually spend more time on adding details and making sure that your piece looks very polished, as opposed to fiddling around with all the little fixes that come with line art. Besides the really cool editing functions, there are other ways to edit your line art as well with these vector layers. You can even change the type of brush that you use just like in the middle of your process. This just like takes the selecting tool and then going into your subtools and then changing out what brush you use. It will always default to one of your ink brushes, but you can use any brush in Clip Studio on a vector layer. It does not change the fact that of like anything that you use. So you can use vector layers throughout your whole entire piece. The only thing that you can't use vector layers for is to fill in your layers. It doesn't work that way. You have to use a raster layer to use color and paint and stuff like that. Vectors is just strictly for line art, but it makes sure that everything else turns out crisp and clean, and it works really well as your reference layer to color in other parts of your artwork. And we won't be getting so far into that in this video because this is strictly a line art piece, but I will go into detail about that in the next piece. That will be the Arthur, the Mystery Skulls Arthur piece. I'll be going to color on that one. So some of you might be asking. If you're not, then I'm going to explain this anyway. The difference between the raster layers and the vector layers is not only the fact that you can do these little edits and stuff like that, but the fact that no matter what you do to the vector line in the vector layer, it will always stay smooth, crisp, and clean, regardless of what you do to it. And that's something that the raster layers can't really achieve when you edit. And if you haven't tried this yet, you can try it like after this video or during this video, however you feel like it. When you edit something with a raster layer, you might get pixelization, even if it's very soft and like just subtle. You will still get some sort of like pixels like happening with your lines in a raster layer. But in a vector layer, you don't get those. You can edit it and change it all you want, and you won't get pixelization. You can kind of see it here when I'm warping this raster layer, when I'm trying to do the little smoke here, is that you don't see it as harshly, but there is some sort of like weird like blurriness that just happens. And that's just the result of using a raster layer versus a vector layer. Vector layers are extremely smooth and clean when you use them correctly, and it just overall makes the quality of your line art turn out just that much more like just amazing. Now with all Clip Studio programs and stuff like that, they all like all the layers work with the rulers, which is just amazing. It is so nice because if a vector layer didn't work with the symmetrical rulers, then this process would probably have gotten a little bit, like, definitely more tedious. But thankfully, all of the layers, regardless of what you use, work with the symmetrical rulers that Clip Studio provides. If you have Clip Studio and you haven't been playing around with the rulers, that's another thing, probably in just like another video, that you should be messing around with because it's super fun to use and it makes it just like less stressful when you are doing things that are symmetrical. It just definitely lowers the amount of time that you spend on a piece. Now you can kind of see with the flower here, I was able to edit that little circle to be more centered with the rest of the flower. So yeah, vector layers, man. Just use vector layers, and you can see me just editing the smoke here, making it look more like just enchanting and just being really nitpicky with like certain types of lines and stuff like that. So yeah, you can see me working on like the background here, where I'm finishing up the final sketch details of the piece before inking in the rest of this. Just as a tip between you and me, always have your sketch layer as clean as you possibly can, just so you know for like just absolutely sure what you want your line art to look like in the very end. It will make sure that your pieces look far more polished. I personally, because that's just what I was trained to do in college, I'm able to tell when someone hasn't actually fleshed out their whole entire idea as a sketch format first, before going forward and inking in a process, because you can see a lot of made up lines in their piece, and it can show to somebody who is trained to see that, but it won't show to like just the common person. So if you're just starting out as an artist, don't worry about that kind of stuff, especially if you're a beginner artist. Just focus on mostly just developing your own style, as well as your like just your hand and eye coordination if you're using a tablet for the first time, or just like practicing your motions and your confident lines. There are a few videos that I will add at the bottom of this video that can help you out with how to practice those types of lines, how to create more confident lines and stuff like that. Because it's always very important to just have that in general. Something that I will briefly touch on when it comes to vector layers, they're not true vectors. Some of you might know the difference between like an actual vector and then what Clip Studio calls a vector. We've explained this a few times, maybe in other videos as well as in on stream, but true vectors are more the lines of like what graphic designers use in Illustrator and Affinity Design, where you can have like really like everything is always crisp regardless of like how much you scale it up and down and stuff like that. Those are what true vectors are, and will save as true vectors, while Clip Studio will always save as a rasterized image. Basically it will always save in a pixel format as opposed to being able to save as like a PDF type of like high quality, like super crisp all the time stuff. Those videos will also help you out with like any issues that you might have with creating a more diverse type of like line width, because if you just use the same line over and over again, then that is a particular type of style. But if you're just using the same line width because you aren't as confident with your lines as you feel like you should be, then those videos down below will definitely help you create some sort of like sense of creating different types of line widths in general. But a good rule of thumb, whatever is closest should have like a thicker like outline, and whatever is furthest away should have a thinner outline. And then another little rule of thumb to help you get you on your way, not become like immediately like pro at line art stuff, because that takes a little while and developing a type of eye for it. But another little like rule of thumb is to have any details on the inside thinner than the details on the outside, and then basically create like thicker lines on the bottom of your piece, like basically give it a weight on the bottom, like a its own like little hidden shadow of the line art underneath the pieces, because you can see, for instance, on the bottom of Vivi there, like the lines are thicker on the bottom than they are on the top, and that will create more diverse line art and just make them overall look more fabulous. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys for watching the video all the way through. If you would like to see future videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you want to help improve future videos as well, leave a comment down below. And lastly, if you would love this design on some lovely merch, I have left a link down in the description below. Finally, remember to stay awesome, and I will see you guys in the next video. So until then, bye-bye.